once again, thank you. We've had the opportunity today to meet with some of the children that have been separated from their parents. We met them, and I think the youngest child was either 6 or 7 years old. And I can tell you what that child needs is it's his mother, not anything that we or that place could provide. It was sad to see. And one of the saddest things, I believe, is the use of religion here. We've heard now Jeff Sessions say that these separations are good and has quoted Paul's letter to the Romans 13. And it's interesting, I studied to be a priest for 4 years, and I love the Bible, and had the opportunity to ask the chaplain today at the facility if he knew if anywhere in the Bible where it says that we ought to separate children from their parents. And he said he knew of none. Of course, there's none. There is one very moving place in the Bible, actually, where Jesus brings together a family. It's in Luke 8. If you remember, there's a little girl that's died. And Jairus, her dad, is trying to meet with Jesus because his daughter is sick. He doesn't realize that she's passed away. And he gets there, and they say, you're late. No, he wants to bring that child back to his mom, to her mom, and to her dad. And so he brings her back from death to life to reunify that family, not to separate them. And if you hear throughout the Bible, the message of Jesus is one of love, not of separation. And that's why we're here, to say that the policies that we have on the separation of children from their parents is immoral. It's wrong. No matter what you say about it, it's certainly not biblical. Just the opposite. It's an immoral act. Quiero dar las gracias a todos los que están aquí, especialmente a nuestra líder que está aquí, Nancy Pelosi. Ella está aquí para ver cómo están separando los niños de sus parientes, de sus mamás, de sus papás. Y qué feo es eso. Pudimos ahora estar con los niños en un centro y vimos los niños desde 6 años de edad. Lo que realmente necesitan son a sus padres, no otro auxilio. Necesitan a sus padres. También tenemos aquí la líder de nuestra conferencia de caucus hispano, aquí, Michelle Grisham, Lujan Grisham, ella es de Nueva México, y también tenemos la chairwoman también del Pacific Asian Caucus, Judy Chu, de Los Ángeles. Y estamos aquí de nuevo para decir que lo que vemos que el gobierno está haciendo, separando a los padres y las madres, no es una cosa bíblica, lo opuesto. Yo tuve la oportunidad ahora de preguntarle a la persona que está allí, al rector de la iglesia, ¿dónde dice en la Biblia que debemos de separar a los padres y los niños? Digo, no hay, por supuesto que no. Entonces, usando la Biblia para hacer una cosa tan inmoral, es una cosa que nosotros no podemos tolerar. Y por eso estamos aquí, para hablar con estos niños. Tuvimos esa oportunidad y también para que ustedes pueden preguntar nosotros preguntas. Ahorita entonces voy a presentarles a la líder de nosotros, a Nancy Pelosi. Now I want to introduce to you our leader, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Congressman Vargas, for welcoming us all here, for arranging for this visit for the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and other members of our caucus on this heartbreaking, barbaric issue that could be changed in a moment by the President of the United States rescinding his action. I'm honored to be here with the members of the Hispanic Caucus, the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific Caucus, and I'm going to ask them to go around and say their names nice and loudly so that everyone can hear.
Congressman Tony Cardenas, I represent Los Angeles.
Congressman Jimmy Gomez from the east side of Los Angeles.
Congresswoman Nanette Barragan, Los Angeles.
Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez, New York.
Congresswoman Susan Davis, Central San Diego.
Congressmember Judy Chu, San Gabriel Valley, California.
Congressman Ruben Kiwen from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Congresswoman Norma Torres of San Bernardino in LA County.
Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Congresswoman Lucille Roybal Allard, Los Angeles.
Congressman Jim Costa, Fresno, California.
Congressman Lou Correa, Orange County, California.
At the same time, and within a 24-hour period, as we are gathered here, there was a delegation that went to the border in Texas. They met with children. They even held some of the children in their arms. This is so heartbreaking. It so challenges the conscience of our country that it must be changed immediately. Today there's another delegation at the Texas border, and yesterday there was a group that went to a detention center in New Jersey. We will be persisting in getting the information that we need to make sure the American people understand that their values are on the line. Our colleague, Mr. Vargas, ever the religious person, he heads up the prayer breakfast every week in Congress. He's quoted the Bible, and I will too. In Matthew 19:13 and 14, it says, "Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. Jesus said, 'Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these.' When he had placed his hands on them." What is it that they are thinking? Maybe I'm a mother of 5 children, grandmother of 9. I know that these people in Congress and in the administration are parents. They understand the damage that is done when stress is exacted on children by separating them from their families. Do they think these children deserve less than their children do in terms of care and love? And so this is not an immigration issue. This is a humanitarian issue. It's about the children. It's also about people seeking asylum. We have had the American Evangelical Association come and testify before us in saying the U.S. refugee resettlement program is the crown jewel of American humanitarianism. And what are we doing but rejecting that now? Don't take our words for it. The National Catholic Conference of Bishops says this is immoral. And in fact, today another letter opposing the legislation that the Republicans are putting forth. The Evangelical Immigration Table has said this is horrible and opposes this dividing children and their parents. Children, it's family, there's a sanctity to it that this administration has chosen to remove. And rather than taking responsibility for their actions, which some of them are, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security, how horrible is that? But the president is saying, it's not my fault, I didn't do it. No, you did do it. You did it to the dreamers, and now you're doing it to the children. You can rescind this action in a moment. So an important point to know is that overwhelmingly the American people are opposed to separating families. They understand the importance of the relationship between children and their families, the damage that can be done to children's brains by the stress that is added by this separation. The list goes on. But also the fraud of the Republicans saying they're going to correct this in their bill when what they have in their bill makes matters worse for children. And those bills must be rejected. And with that, I, again, am honored to be with my colleagues here. They have a lot to say on all of this. I know you'll be hearing individually from some of them, but right now I'm very honored to yield to the distinguished chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus from New Mexico, Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham.
Thank you, Madam Leader, and thank you to my colleagues and the leadership of the minority caucuses in the Democratic caucus for working diligently to not only highlight this abhorrent effort by the federal government, but to make really clear that we're doing everything in our power to stop the President and Homeland Security from continuing to enact pain using the terminology zero tolerance for anyone breaking the law, which apparently for them and some in Congress is license to harm children. I mean, that's what it really is. This is more like a zero inhumanity policy. It is intended unequivocally not to just continue to punish asylum seekers and those seeking refuge constitutionally in this country by a system that is in fact broken But instead of addressing those issues legitimately and productively and humanely, they are immorally now using these children and purposely enacting harm, so much harm, 2,700 children, that in fact now we're seeing the kinds of horrific responses, including the man who committed suicide. I can't think of another country where we would stand idly by and allow that country to treat children and families in this cruel, inhumane, inappropriate manner. The purpose of these trips by Congress is to continue to bring serious attention, and I'm sure this is happening to every member here. In my own community, my own district, I have families who are calling me in the middle of the night, who are coming to my office during the day, who want to foster these children, who want to get on a bus, who want to fly out here immediately, who want to drive their own cars. We have teachers all across the country who want to organize trips. They want to stand outside, whether they're detention centers or these tent cities or even the refugee settlements, which programs, which we understand are necessary when we have unaccompanied minors. The notion that this country would continue to create these problems, and let's talk about who it is that's coming here. They are fleeing such horrific violence and rape, the kinds of conditions that every single one of us would run from in order to protect our children and our families. We reject them here, and then we inflict the kind of pain where we separate them from their children. They have no idea what happens next, including these children. And when everyday Americans are standing up and willing to do what they think, whatever it would take to make a difference in the lives of these children, of these families, how is it possible that we don't have a president who would rescind this zero inhumanity policy immediately? In the same way, he could rescind his decision on DACA. He has complete power over these situations. And the notion that we collectively don't have enough power in response to hold this federal administration and the White House accountable is exactly the purpose of these trips. So we're going to continue to highlight these issues, to bring justice back to a system of asylum and refugee status in this country, to make sure that our Constitution is upheld. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that every community, including this one, is clear about what is really happening and will join us to do practical, productive efforts to make sure that we're protecting people in this country and not the opposite. And with that, I'm very honored to introduce another incredible champion on these issues, Judy Chu, who introduced herself briefly, who is the chairwoman of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. Judy.
Today, we are a group of 14 Congress members that have come to investigate the cruelest act that is going on in America right now, and that is the separation of children from their parents. This morning, we went to a shelter. We saw 62 young kids. Amongst them were unaccompanied minors and children who were separated from their parents. And the mental health workers there told us that these were children who were fleeing gang violence from places like Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, and that they needed to be able to live a life, just live even their life at all, because of the threats of gang violence that could certainly result in murder and worse. And so we know that it's important for gang violence to be one of the reasons for asylum. And it is unconscionable that it cannot be at this point. But it's even more unconscionable that children are being separated from their parents. And now we have over 2,000 of them that have been separated. When they are separated, they're ripped from the arms of their parents. The parents don't even know whether they are there or how long they will be separated, whether it could be a week or months. And it is up to President Trump to own the fact that he made this policy, that he made this zero tolerance policy. Trump started this, and Trump can end this. He can pick up the phone, and he can stop this. And he should not be using these children as a bargaining chip for what he wants in an immigration bill, a big border wall. He should not be using the lives of these young, vulnerable children for this. So I say, President Trump, do the decent thing, pick up the phone, stop this unconscionable policy. And now, I'd like to open this up for questions and answers.
Yes.
Joshua Smith, San Diego Union Tribune.
Yes, Josh.
Today, Jeff Sessions said that this is about deterring people from crossing illegally with children, often in places that are dangerous, making long trips through the desert, right? So this idea that, yes, maybe some short-term pain, but long-term, we're going to get people to use the proper channels. How do you respond?
I would respond the same way that I would to what he said about the Bible, that it's just not true. It's just not true. The reality is that we're using cruelty here, not as a way to prevent people from coming, but just to be cruel. I don't think it does anything to stop people from coming, frankly. You heard the conditions that they're living under. I don't think it does anything like that. I think, once again, he used the crutch of the Bible, and that didn't work for him. So now he's trying to use something else, and it's just simply untrue.
I want to add to that because in Congress, we have a $640 million investment for the Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. We have been working on an infrastructure to help children there in their own home country, to help them escape violent areas within those countries. That system was working until President Trump was elected and decided he wanted to utilize these kids as a way to get a border wall. So what I have to say is we are working on an infrastructure in the Northern Triangle. Let's continue with that policy. Let's continue to try to help them in their home country. And then let's not deny families from staying together, especially children that are with lactating mothers, and we're ripping them apart.
I'm sorry.
Let me just say also.
Louis, if you come over here.
Just identify yourself.
I'm Congresswoman Norma Torres, 35th.
Come on.
Congressman Correa, Orange County, California. When I was visiting the children, I asked one of the counselors, tell me about these kids, and confirmed what I thought, which is when these kids are growing up in Central America, they're given a choice. Get a certain age, you either join a gang, MS-13 that the president talks about, or you die. They pick a third, which is go north in search of possibly a survival alternative. So given that situation, how is this going to be deterrent? Let's get down and come up with some practical solutions that save lives, and in the name of God, do what's correct, do what's humane, and what's American by our tradition.
What was the facility you all visited today?
Southwest?
Cousin Sandy, go to Southwest Keys facility.
Southwest Keys.
Can you paint a picture of what it looked like? Tell us what you saw.
Well, I think it's really more important to focus on the policy. Because when my colleagues were speaking, I was reminded of conversations I had with the administration, where they would say these parents were irresponsible to take their children across a desert, and so we have to take the children away from these parents because they endangered the lives of their children. Understand their basic premise. The fact is, as Mr. Correa and Congresswoman Torres and others have said, they had no choice. It was a matter of life and death. They couldn't stay there. So for this administration to say, as they have said, we know better. We're going to take the children away. We're going to put them in foster homes. We're going to take them away from their parents who broke the law. There's just something fundamentally wrong with their reasoning, except when you understand that they're doing this as Congresswoman Torres said, they're doing this to get other bad immigration policy. But as I say, this isn't an immigration matter. This is a humanitarian. This is a family matter. And I say to the president, we have zero tolerance for your neglect and for your policy of selecting, separating children from their parents. We have zero tolerance for your having this number. The administration said today the number could go up to 30,000 children by August. 30,000 children. Do you have tolerance for that? And we have zero tolerance for the bills in Congress that they are touting as being positive in this regard, which make matters worse. So understand, it's not a question of facility. That's a whole other subject. It's a question of policy humanitarianism, abandoning the principles of our country in terms of respect for individuals and the sanctity of family.
I think that...
Why don't we go right... Hold on a second. I think she had a question, Jess. We're about to go ahead.
I was just curious, was Casa San Diego the only facility that you visited, and can you provide any kind of picture as to what you saw at the places that you visited?
Well, we've all been to several facilities on the border. No, but this morning, did you?
Yeah, so we've been to two. We're going to be going to 4 facilities altogether today. But the facility where the children were is the one I think you're specifically asking about. And so we were there this morning. We saw children from the age, I believe, 6 to 17. Were the people there trying hard? I think so. But I mean, what I saw is a bunch of little kids running around, hoping and wishing their parents were there coming to visit, not us. We showed up. I think that they were happy that we showed up, that someone cared about them. But, boy, wouldn't have they been glad if they saw their mom or dad walk through the door. That's really what they wanted. The leader was talking about it, but one clinician in particular told us about the trauma. He said, all these kids suffer huge trauma. Can you imagine being ripped away from your mom or your dad? Many of you are parents. If you had your child ripped away from you, imagine the trauma that they would suffer. That's what he explained, and that's what was certainly in my mind when I think of that facility. Not bad people there, I have to tell you. I think that they're trying hard with what they have, but it's just these poor kids that have been ripped away from their parents.
Isn't it true that this has been a policy for years? The only difference right now is the frequency.
No, that's not true.
No, because of the frequency, because of the zero tolerance. But
no, that's not true. That's not true at all.
Thank you for the question so that we can clarify.
So has this been the policy? No, this has not been the policy. The policy has been to try to keep families together. Right. So yes, before there's been unaccompanied minors. Yes, kids have arrived without their mom and dads. But no, we didn't take children and rip them away from their moms when they were trying to nurse their kids. We didn't do stuff like that. No, that's new. That's not. So anyone that says, hasn't this always been our policy? No, it hasn't been our policy. This is an inhumane policy that just started, and that's why we're all so mad about it. No, there have been situations, of course, when kids have arrived unaccompanied. Yes, and we do the best we can, but we haven't ripped them away from their moms and dads.
But it has been a policy that was rejected by President Obama and President George W. Bush.
That's right.
And I just want to add, as a member of Homeland Security, just several weeks ago, met with former Secretary Jay Johnson that says they went out of their way to try to build facilities to keep the family unit together. And so that is very different than what is happening now. Now, one of the facilities that we went to today, the second facility, was where we saw the parents. I'm representing 3 of the women who are at that facility and had a chance to talk to them, to hear them tell their story, that they had no chance to say goodbye to their kids, that they were put into a room in some instances and were just told that they weren't going to see their kids anymore, was heartbreaking. And that is what is happening, and that is the injustice. And this is something that we need to continue to shed light on and to hear the stories of these women. There's nothing short of a jail cell. That is what we saw today. We saw jails where we saw people in blue jumpsuits and orange jumpsuits, and when you sit in a room and you talk to them, they break down. In some instances, one woman hadn't spoken to her child maybe once in 30 days. He was shipped to New York. That's injustice. And others not knowing where their kids are or what's happening and how can you help connect me to my kid or tell me what is going on. These are some of the conversations that I had today with 3 of the mothers in these facilities who have been separated from their kids. And I will say one more thing. When we first got there, we were told nobody in this facility has been separated from their kids, to which I said, not true, because I represent 3 of the mothers. And all of a sudden, the number changed, right? How much other information did we get today that's inaccurate?
There's a person right back there. You've had your hand up quite a bit.
Was it just boys? Was it girls? I believe Casa San Diego maybe just boys? Did you see a mix of both there? What did you guys see as far as?
So Casa San Diego has both. We saw the boys. They do have girls also in 2 separate houses, which we did not go to see today. They have both. So the children that we saw today were boys.
They're mostly boys.
So,
boys.
also, so don't take it from us that this is a new policy. Congressman Jimmy Gomez from Los Angeles. Casa San Diego specifically referred to the new family separation policy. So that's not us. They even had a memo from, I believe, ICE or Border Patrol on how to handle calls between the kids that were separated from their parents and their parents who are in other facilities. So don't take it from us that this is a new policy if you don't want to believe us, but it's true.
What is your message to President Trump at this point? We're debating semantics over.
We said the message to Mr. Trump is stop this inhumane, barbaric policy, rescind your actions, and take responsibility for it instead of blaming it on other people. Well, you want to psychoanalyze the President of the United States? There are enough hours in the day for that. But I will say that the more the public speaks up about this, because they say this is not about immigration. This is about humanity. It's about family. It's about who we are as a country. And it is such a departure from President Obama, President George W. Bush, President Clinton, President George Herbert Walker Bush, President Ronald Reagan. They all understood the respect for people in our country, but not this president.
Was the president elected in Parliament as an anti-immigration platform or immigration reform platform?
But we fully look to do comprehensive immigration reform with the president. That does not include ripping children out of the arms of their parents, telling them we're going to give them a bath and taking them away in a car.
Yeah, he was elected. He was elected by the American people, right? And some of the most outrageous anti-immigration policies, but he was not elected to commit child abuse. This is child abuse, and it's striking a nerve with the American people that are rejecting this type of policy.
That's right. Former First Lady Laura Bush came out and said, this is inhumane. Immoral. First Lady Melania Trump is saying the same thing. So listen to your wife.
I responded to Secretary Nielsen this morning, said they were seeing an increase in people at the border pretending to be family units. Did you see those comments this morning?
I think she should resign. I think she should
I don't know, but can you respond to
No, but I think we want to hear from some other people who are here.
Don't you want to respond to her comments?
No.
She said that she believes or implied that people are using children as a get-out-of-jail-free card.
And that's exactly what the President of the United States is doing. He's using these children to advance a bad policy and to inflame his base. This is red meat for his base. But I think he underestimates the dignity of his base when he says, I can go to the most extreme place at the border, and that extreme place is taking children away from their parents. That's not the American way.
Secretary Nielsen last night said it was not their policy to separate children. That was last night, and this morning, 180-degree change. That's right. So you got to ask, what is really going on? And I think even Secretary Nielsen understands the situation.
Okay, we have a question. Hold on a second. There's a person. Hold on a second. There's a person that's had her hand up a long time. Go ahead.
Congressman, I appreciate it. We were curious about where girls are being housed. We've seen a lot of boy-only facilities, which got us to thinking, wait, are there girls-only facilities, and how are girls being taken care of?
Yeah, it's an issue, of course, that was brought up here, and I'll maybe respond to this because I was the one that organized this. So obviously we have delicate populations here. when you're dealing with children, these are delicate population, and girls in particular, it's a very delicate situation. So since the group is fairly large, I made the decision that we wouldn't go to where the girls were because their housing is smaller. The larger institution is the one that I decided that we would go to because it could more easily facilitate a group this large. That's why. But are there girls? Of course there are. Have girls been taken away from their moms? Yes. Are they here housed in San Diego? Yes. We did not go to see them because, again, I felt that it was a sensitive population. The facilities there I didn't think were such that could take the capacity that we had, so I made that decision, good or bad. That was mine.
So is it fair to say that they are in the same centers, but they just have different bedroom areas? Or
No. So the situation is this: there's a fairly large facility where all the boys are housed, but it is also where they have the medical units and a lot of the clinical help that a lot of these children need. Now, there's where you have the boys. The girls are in two separate houses. They don't have as many, frankly, clinical facilities and medical facilities. So they do come and they do reunify there in the larger institution. But they live separately in these houses. And I'm not trying to knock the group. They're trying to do the best they can in a very difficult situation with these girls and with these children. But they are housed separately. And they do reunify sometimes. They're in the larger facility, the boys and the girls. But they're very, it's the same center, but they don't live in the same center. They live in separate houses, again, very sensitive populations.
And what's important about that is that sometimes the girls are sibling to the boys. So some of our questions were, how do they get to see each other and the rest? So we raised the concerns that probably you have, that of course my 4 daughters have, where are the girls and how are they being treated? And you can understand why they would be separate, but if they're siblings, how are they brought together? Because it just comes back to the same word. It comes back to family. We can have debates about the policy and the this or the that, which is wrong. But the fundamental unifying principle for our country is this is about family, and they cannot undermine family as an American way and expect the world to have any regard for how we regard family. So this is very, for us, not political. It's very prayerful, as a matter of fact. But we do know the answer lies in the stroke of a pen from the President of the United States.
There's a question in Spanish over here that we need to take.
Usted dijo al principio sobre el presupuesto, cómo estaban las cosas bien antes y del Triángulo del Norte, lo que mencionó de los 600 millones.
Sí, ahorita el gobierno americano tiene una inversión de 640 millones en el Triángulo Norte, Guatemala, El Salvador y Honduras. Tenemos una póliza americana que hemos estado trabajando los últimos 3 años y medio. Estaba trabajando hasta el momento que este presidente decidió cambiar la póliza. Y cuando él cambió esta política y comenzó a usar a los niños para obtener el dinero que necesita financiar el muro, entonces fue cuando comenzaron a cambiar esta póliza. La póliza que estaba trabajando y seguimos trabajando. Es algo que republicanos y demócratas hemos trabajado juntos.
To rescind this policy. It is un-American. It is cruel. It's inhumane.
And it's indefensible.
Any other questions?
Yes. Do you think essentially that, I know you don't want to psychoanalyze the president, but is he willing to be labeled inhumane to make a point there?
You know, I don't want to, and I won't psychoanalyze anybody. I do know this, that he has tried to backtrack on his own policy by saying that it's the law, that the Democrats passed a law that you have to do, that it's wrong to do this. That's untrue. There is no law that requires him to do that. And I think the reason he says that...
He believes there is a law or he doesn't understand?
No, I can't psychoanalyze this. The only thing I can tell you is this, that it is such a terrible thing that I don't think he can own up to it. You know, tearing a child away from a mom when that mother's just trying to provide a better life for that child is a monstrous thing to do. And I don't think that he can own up to that. That's why he's trying to blame others.
Agents come across somebody saying it's been deported twice.
His staff knows
They all know.
what the law is. They also know the Flores decision, which would be overturned by the legislation that the Republicans are putting forth in Congress.
You've had your hand up, and I haven't called you. Go ahead.
I believe someone indicated that by August we could see as many as, was it 30,000?
The leader did, yes.
What is going to happen here?
Well, it's a great question. That is why we're here. The only way to be able to handle that many children, frankly, would be to set up tent camps, encampments. There's no way you can handle that many children. And I think if it ever got to that point, I don't know what the American people would do. Right now, even at church yesterday, I had people coming up to me and saying, that can't possibly be the case, that they're really separating mothers and kids. I said, they are. In fact, we had a case where a mother was nursing a child and the child was taken from the mother. I mean, it is that bad. So if we had encampments, once again, to intern these kids, I mean, I don't think the American public would stand for that.
Last question. May I ask a question? Other than going into these detention centers and sharing with the American people what you see, the stories that you hear, what can you actually do to stop the separation of women and children?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, we can urge the president to take that pen and reverse his order. I mean, that's ultimately what has to happen. He has the ability to do this, unfortunately. He has the power to do it, to separate kids. It's become his policy now. He can own up to it and stop saying that the Democrats are some legal mandate and say, you know what I was doing was wrong, and it was a wrong-headed idea, and so I'm going to reverse. That's why we're trying to put faces to some of the inactions. That's why we're trying to come here to let people know what's really going on, that you are separating that no, it wasn't happening before. This is something new. It's horrendous. And the American people are starting to understand that. I mean, again, any of you that come in contact, I know because I'm a politician here in San Diego, I go to church at the Mission. I mean, after church yesterday, I was mobbed by people saying, and by the way, most of them were Republicans, not Democrats, saying, how can this be? You've got to stop this. I said, well, we're trying to stop this. The American people don't want to see this. I mean, this is not our values. These are not our values to separate families like this. The bishops, I think, are going to come out loud and clear. I think more and more religious groups. I asked myself, who are these Christians that support this? I was happy to ask the chaplain today, the Christian chaplain at one of the facilities, where in the Bible does it say we got to separate children from their parents? Of course, nowhere it says that. And so I think that American people are going to come to the realization that what's happening is something very evil and very wrong, and are going to urge the president to reverse. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Congress, on the Republican side and on our side, to force the president to change his mind.
Congressman, has the